Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of the One Power Hour. I am your host, Miracle Jones. We want to thank you so much for joining us. We have a jam-packed conversation that we're going to have today. And we're at the end, we're going to have some conversations and a quick little presentation about what's going on this election cycle. I know it's so much happening here. But our first guest had to reschedule because he was very busy and wanted to make sure that he was able to come back, talk about what's going on in Washington and what's some of the work that he has been doing to address the issues of concern that's happening within his community. And we want to welcome back to the program our first guest, Mayor JoJo Burgess, who is the mayor of Washington. Welcome back, Mayor JoJo.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I'm sorry, like I said about the last time, but this time we have a little bit better of a situation that we're dealing with.
Yes, and for people who may not have had the pleasure of meeting you before, can you just talk a little bit about who you are and your story about becoming mayor of Washington?
Uh, Again, my name is JoJo Burgess. I am the first elected Black mayor of the city of Washington, PA. 200-year history of the city. I'm the first one. I had a grassroots effort, knocking doors and going and meeting people where they're at. I did not realize that the job that I took on was so engaging, but I'm getting used to it now, and we're working through some issues and things like that, and getting things done. Trying to rebuild a community. That's we've been hit like every other community in southwestern Pennsylvania with some job losses because the factories closing down, people moving away, just not having the base of people that we need in order to be a good functioning city. And I have to say that myself and the council that we have in Washington is trying to do our best to elevate us to a different level.
Thank you so much for sharing that information. You talked, about Washington County and some of the issues you've been having. But can you just talk about, the work that you have been doing and how you have been trying to make sure that people know about Washington and some of the initiatives that you have introduced?
I want to make sure that I'm clear on something because a lot of people will get it mixed up. I'm the mayor of the city of Washington, which is the county seat for Washington County. That our county is ran by commissioners that oversee the whole county. But myself here in the city of Washington and what I've done, I've every year since I was actually running, I've had job fairs. I feel that we got to meet people where they're at. If you need a job and you need to make a living and have a way of life, I'm trying to provide that for people like that. We've done 3 different job fairs in the last 3 years. Of course, like I say, this is only my second year in office, so that tells me I'm invested in that. I've also met with businesses, and we've actually started rebuilding things. One of the big problems that I had when I first got elected was our hospital merging with UPMC, and a lot of people did not like that merger, but we got that merger over the hump. We saved the hospital, and again, working behind the scenes, they got their first contract with UPMC back in January. So what I look at is community engagement. I'm trying to give people a hand up and a way of life. Another thing that I'm working on here in the city of Washington is we have blighted properties that people want to see tore down or want to see us get rid of them. I have a program that we're going to take monies that we have for demolishing these houses and getting rid of them, and we're going to flip them. We're going to give local contractors the opportunity to go in and remodel and refurbish these houses. And then we're going to put low income, like single mothers, veterans, people that need that hand that would never ordinarily have an opportunity to own a house. They're going to own this house, and they're going to go through the financial counseling and everything to show that they're stable enough to do it. And we're going to start moving people into a house of their home. I always say that a house of your own is like a rose. A rose you have is planted and plants roots. I don't want just a little potted flower that you can move around and be a renter and have to pay somebody else. I want people to have something that they can call their own. If you have a roof over your head, that is half the battle, because when you don't have to worry about that, the other things will come into play a lot easier for you because you're not having that struggle of every day with that. So that's just a small little thing other than the everyday stuff that we do just to try to maintain the city.
No, I think that is great because when we talk about, the structures and interrupting violence, making sure people have a job, making sure people have a home, and making sure people have that, access to healthcare is so very much important. And the fact that you've been able to take on these initiatives in such a short amount of time, shows that people trust you and value your leadership. And so you talked about the housing and particularly making sure that people are able, who are maybe renting or have been dissuaded to own home ownership, are able to have a chance at purchasing these homes after you flip them. How are some of these initiatives being offered to young people? How can people show up to support and learn more about them?
Well, the housing thing that we're doing, we just started and announced a few months ago. So we're still building that program, and we have not looked at any young people yet because we're trying to get some established like single mothers and stuff like that into these homes and trying to get a model to follow. We know that the first time we're able to move somebody in, that will show us the way on where we could, what mistakes we have made, what things we need to do better, what things we've done good, all that good thing that you need to evaluate. But as for the jobs, one thing that I do is when I have my job fairs, not only do I make it available to people in the community, I go to the local high schools, all of them that are around here, not just in the city of Washington, all around to the vocational schools. I also bring in the trade unions that have these apprenticeship programs for kids that can help a kid that may not want to go to college. One thing that I find, especially in the Black community, and I might be off base with this, and I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, but people feel like if you have a college degree, you made it. And that's the only way you can make it and you can compete. Whenever I believe, and I know because I don't have a college degree. I went to the military when I got out of high school, and I started working. I made trade labor unionist. That's where I got my put the food on my table for my family. Kids don't have to go get that degree. They don't need to have that importance and that pressure of you have to graduate from college because some people just aren't cut for it and some don't want to do it, but they have a talent that they can use that can make them some money. And maybe if it's in the trades, if it's in IT or somewhere, they can go out there and get that work, start making that money and be very productive citizens. And we got to start encouraging that more because one thing that I learned about in Southwestern Pennsylvania, we have a deficit of workers because of the baby boomers that are retiring and people that are going off into other things. In the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a deficiency of about 200,000 workers for jobs that are coming into this area, whether it be IT jobs, whether it be working in a mill, whether it be working in a trade union and building something. These jobs are coming available, and they're plentiful, and they're good life-sustaining jobs that people can do, can raise a family on, put homesteads in, whatever area they're in, and they can just be productive citizens. And we have to continue to encourage that, push that, and help everybody to achieve that. And if it is that they're going to college, we can also do stuff like that too. We're trying to make sure they have the proper funding and grants that are available to them as long as they're not taken away from us by a certain, individual. And I'm not going to harp on that too much.
I understand.
But if they have these opportunities and we get these opportunities for them, this is how we build our communities, by giving kids something to do other than being in these streets. Because listen, over the weekend here in Washington, we lost a kid to the streets, and that pains me whenever we have that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and to follow up, since you brought it up, can you just talk a little bit about, the realities that you're facing in the city of Washington about how like violence has impacted it, but how these programs and policies give people an alternative to not having to face that same outcome. 'Come. 'Cause. 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 '
I don't know if it's because of maybe the association that people have with friends, what kids have with different peer pressure, whatever. I feel that some of the younger generation feel it's better to be cool and hip than to be anything different than that, and it becomes problematic because I'm going to speak a little bit about what happened here in Washington, and then maybe you'll understand where I'm coming from. We had a young man that was shot and killed in the city of Washington this past weekend. And there was a group of people that were around that seen everything that happened. But because of this new, whether it be the code of the streets, I ain't no snitcher, I ain't no whatever, a family is left with questions. And then they look at me as the mayor for the answers that I can't give them because I wasn't there. I didn't see what happened, but I know that my detectives are working diligently to try to get those answers for you. But all it takes is one to come and say, this is what I saw. We got to start getting back into the if you've seen something, say something type of mentality, because families are being decimated by violence in all of our communities. And I'm in Washington. It's on a much greater scale in the city of Pittsburgh. We just seen in McKeesport where a guy got gunned down on his motorcycle. I mean, we're seeing all this happen and nobody's seeing anything, but everybody's there. That's got to stop. We've got to start making people know who the bad actors are so we can get them out of the way so that positive people can do positive things in our community.
And can you also just talk about, like you said, these 200,000 jobs are coming to Pittsburgh? I mean, to Pittsburgh, but just to the region. Can you also just talk about?
When I say that, they're not coming to like there's something grand scheme of things that's going to bring these jobs to the area. The grand scheme of things is there are people that are coming up on retirement age, and when you look at people that are going to be eligible to retire and go out versus the people that are eligible to come and start working, that is where you're starting to get some of this deficit at, with some of the job growth with different new entities that may come into the area. But the baby boomers retiring, they were a very, very plentiful group of individuals. There's not as many of the people coming up as those ones that are leaving.
Mhm. And so, can you just talk about how it's like very important? So you said, these acts of violence are happening, but can you also talk about how it's very important to have, you know, people that's going to the schools, whether it is going to these different community groups, why it's so important that people see an alternative, where so that they are not being pressured to engage in acts of violence or feel like that their only alternative if they want something to eat or if they want, access to a shelter is to engage in these industries of violence.
I am very fortunate to have a couple people in my community that are awesome. And I'm going to mention them by name, and I don't know if they'll hear this or not, but I'm going to mention them by name and their organizations. Number one is a Teresa Burrows, who runs what is called the Lemoyne Multicultural Center. They have a food program in the summer for kids that have food insecurities. They have an after-school program that kids go to after school that may have food insecurities where they could get something to eat. They could get structured lessons on doing their homework, and they have all that structure in place that keeps them away from these streets. They have a safe place to go to eat, learn, and be comfortable. People like that are the people that I have in my community. Another one would be another gentleman by the name of Avery Turner, who has an organization called Loyal here in the city of Washington. Loyal now found a piece of property. They have a boxing gym. They have wrestling mats, and they're geared more towards the teenage kids that are saying, hey, look, you don't need to be out in them streets. You come here. We're going to teach you how to box, do something. Here, you can take all that aggression out here legally and still be friends with this person, still learn like this person, and still move in the right way, in a positive way. And we take when those kids get into those preteen years, that's where it's my job to come in and say, now, okay, what is the assistance you need from me to help you expand this program so that when these kids get done with this program, if they don't go on to some other type of sports or something like that, let's find them a job. Let's find them employment. Let's find them something that gives them self-value and worth. Because one thing that I've learned is the streets can get you, if you don't feel good about yourself and they make you feel like you're something. We got to start making these kids, letting them know they are something and they could be very productive and that they don't need that lifestyle. The one thing that I preach about the streets is there's only two ways you're going to end up whenever you get out in these streets, either dead or incarcerated. And far too much, we give other people the ability to say that we're savages, we're whatever we are, and disregard any other kind of mistreatment we get because of the way that they look at us. And we have people that kind of like help them with that. We got to start make sure we keep on building positive character people, having positive things happening, and giving these kids every advantage they can to be successful. And like I said, with these two programs that I have down here in the city of Washington, I can't be any prouder of the work that these individuals do to help our kids strive for greatness and to be great at what they do.
Yes, and you said we always look for the helpers, and so that's like some amazing, fantastic programming that you had. At the top of the hour, you talked about how the city of Washington, just like everybody else, has had their fair share of, struggles. Can you also just talk a little bit about some of the barriers that you have faced and how you've been able to either overcome them or learn from them as you've been mayor, for this first term?
Well, the barriers is always going to be the people and the naysayers that want to try to stop what you're doing, that want to hinder that want to put roadblocks up in different obstacles. I've been fortunate enough to have enough uh, of a council that I work with that we're all on the same page, and it's very rare that we get something like that. We're all on the same page. We're all working for the same goal, and we know how to reach out to the different community members to achieve what we need to do to help them. I I always say that when we talk about this job with me as mayor, it's not about me, it's about us. If we can all come together and be together and do what we got to do, we can all be successful. And I work with that mentality. This is nothing about me. And yes, I understand the historic event of it, me being the first and everything like that, but it's not about me, it's about us. As long as we keep that mentality of it being about us and we work together, regardless of who you are, regardless of your race or creed or your sex or anything like that, if we keep working for us, we will be just fine.
Thank you so much for, sharing that, that great word of wisdom. But before we let you go, do you have any words of advice or any message that you would like to share to the youth of the city of Washington?
What I'd like to share to the city of Washington youth is one thing and one thing only. You have a mayor that is invested in you. You have someone that you can call on, that you can come and see, that you can talk to, that you can find guidance with. If we need to find some help for you, if we got to find you a job, if you're a teenager or something like that, excuse me, you got someone that's investing in you, because the way I look at that is the children really are our future. My time as the mayor is going to be short, regardless of whatever it is. There's going to be one of these young individuals that's going to come up and they're going to be leading a city, leading the school, leading some of these programs where we have some of these helpers that are doing so much good for us with us. And I just want them to know that I'll help you to get that. I'll make sure you can attain that. I got a gentleman that has a son who always tells everybody his son is going to be the next JoJo Burgess. And you know what I tell them? I don't want your son to be the next JoJo Burgess. I want your son to be the first, whatever his name is, because I want him to do more than me and be greater than me. I want him to be better than me. I want to be constant improvement. I want to be able to mentor the next and not be known as the first.
Well, Mayor JoJo Burris, I want to say thank you so much for sitting down with us to have this conversation. I know you got to go to actually go and support the youth in the city, so I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are so grateful that Mayor JoJo took the time out to talk a little bit about the work that he is doing in the city of Washington, because it's so important that we actually have people in these positions of power that care for us and, who are doing the good work. But not all of us can be mayor. So how are you able to still get involved and show up, for your community, Do not fear. Our next guest is going to talk a little bit about that. We want to welcome Pittsburgh Women for Democracy. Megan, thank you so much and welcome to the Womanhood Power Hour.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We are very excited that you're here with us. But to get right into it, can you just talk a little bit about your background and what is the Pittsburgh Women for Democracy?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we formed last summer and we called ourselves Pittsburgh Women for Harris. Some of my background is that I kind of got the political bug early in my life. So back in 2008, I was a volunteer on the Obama campaign, and I learned a ton doing that work. I lived up in Boston at the time, and I had a blast, and I met all sorts of wonderful people. And what I realized was that unless you're involved in that world, you don't always know how to jump in. You don't know how to canvass. You don't know that you can phone bank. You don't know the people that you might be able to reach out to ask, where do you need volunteers? How do I get a yard sign? All of those things. That's like kind of insider information that you learn by being a part of that community. So fast forward to last summer, when Kamala Harris sort of informally accepted the nomination from Joe Biden right after he had announced that he was not going to continue to run. I thought, gosh, we're going to have to do this really fast. And I want to be able to create a way for people to learn about all the opportunities that they would have to get involved, and started a group called Pittsburgh Women for Harris. And we very quickly had a ton of people following us on Instagram and on Facebook. And we were able to create a conduit for people to get involved in the campaign in whatever way they wanted to be involved. Through that, we were able to be identified as something called an indivisible action team, which is like what they were calling these groups that were popping up to help people get involved. And then, of course, we all know how that election ended. And we took a beat, kind of all slept and grieved. And we started talking to each other again in December and said, like, hey, what do we want to do next? Like, what's going to be next? And at that time, no one really knew. We were not sure what the administration was going to look like or how quickly they were going to start, activating Project 2025. But a group of us got together and we said, let's stick around. Let's keep this going and let's see if we can reform and kind of react to this new administration. And so we decided to continue to be part of Indivisible. We are an Indivisible group. And we have 4 action teams. We have an advocacy team, education team, civic engagement team, and then our resistance team, which many people know our resistance team because of the work that they've been doing around immigration, specifically the Moshannon Valley Detention Center. So that's the quick version of our, the last year of us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that condensed, quick version, of a rundown. And so with some of the work you've also been doing, you've been, as an organization, very, very heavily invested in educating people about, the Moshannon Detention Center and how ICE has been really ravaging our neighborhoods. Can you talk a little bit about why you felt that in this time it was so important to do that work and to educate people about what was happening right here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was in about April that our resistance team had a meeting and identified immigration as one of the topics that they really wanted to focus on. And they came back to me and said, hey, did you know that the largest ICE detention center in the Northeast is right here in Pennsylvania? And I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I did not know that. And I thought, well, gosh, I'm kind of dialed in. If I didn't know this, I can't imagine how many other Pennsylvanians don't know what's happening right here in our Commonwealth. And so we decided to make building awareness of the facility one of our big campaigns for the year. I would love to see every Pennsylvanian knowing the name Shannon Valley Detention Center, knowing that it's the largest ICE detention center in the Northeast, knowing that it's right here in the Commonwealth, and knowing exactly what's gone on there, knowing about the various human rights complaints that have been made about the treatment of people inside that facility, knowing about the 4 ACLU lawsuits that have been filed against the facility, and complaints as well. Though that sort of awareness of the facility, we think, is the first step to having people really speak out and express concerns to the 3 decision makers, who are the 3 county commissioners in Clearfield County who have signed a contract with ICE to essentially be the middleman between ICE and the GEO Group, which is the for-profit prison operator that owns and operates the Shannon Valley Detention Center.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important because, like you said, sometimes you see these national stories and you don't even know that they have an impact, like right here,
Right.
locally. So I really appreciate you, breaking that down. I do hope people get like more involved. And
Yeah.
as you talk about, some of the work that you are doing, can you also just expound upon what caused you to say, you know what, we're doing all this work. We also need to get involved in this No Kings outreach that's happening. And we need to bring people together this Saturday.
Yeah, that's another great question. So, because we're an indivisible group, sometimes we get like the inside info on when these big days are going to happen. So back in August, we heard that No Kings was going to be scheduled for October 18th. And so we were planning a big Moshannon rally at the time. And so we said like, okay, yeah, No Kings, sure. And then we came home and we looked at the calendar and we said, oh my gosh, that's going to be like 3 weeks from November 4th, from the big election in the state. And so we said, wow, this is such a great opportunity to bring people together and then to talk to them about something really big that they can do right here at home, to protect us in this state against this sort of encroaching authoritarianism, which is what this No Kings message is really meant to be about. We can actually protect ourselves here by participating in the election, by getting informed about what our Supreme Court does in the state, what our other courts in the state, what, the Commonwealth Court, et cetera, what those courts do. So we can inform ourselves and then we can get ourselves to the polls to make sure that we are expressing ourselves and making that vote so that we can help to keep Pennsylvania, at least, safer inside of whatever's going to happen in the sort of at the federal level in DC.
Okay. And as you're like doing this, can you just talk a little bit about what should people expect this Saturday?
Yeah.
Where is No Kings going to be located?
Yeah.
And who's all invited to attend?
Yeah, well, everyone is invited to attend. Anyone and everyone who wants to come, we would love to see you there. We will be in Point State Park from 2 to 4 p.m. on Saturday, October 18th. There are many No Kings events that will be happening on Saturday all around our region. And that is by design, actually. So I recently heard Leah Greenberg, who is one of the co-executive directors of Indivisible, talking about the sort of growth of these national movements. Back during the first Trump administration, they had a family separation rally, and that was a huge rally at that time. And there were 700 locations. Our No Kings rallies back in June, we had about 2,100 locations. I think it was one of the largest mass mobilization events that we've had in the country. This rally, this day of action, has, I think, over 2,500 locations. So we're growing every time. And I think the thing that's really important about that growth is that every time someone thinks to themselves, I heard this thing on the news and I was like buying into what Trump was saying, but this thing made me reconsider that. Like, I didn't like what I heard, but I don't know anyone who's protesting. I don't know anyone who's speaking out against this. So maybe that's not common, or maybe that's unpopular, or maybe I should dismiss this kind of doubt that I have. What I really want them to do is see, oh my gosh, I live in Coriopolis and there's a No Kings event happening in my area. I now feel like I have permission to like turn that questioning side of my brain on a little bit, or maybe go down and check out the rally and see what it's all about, or maybe take that extra minute and research something that came up that you didn't like. So I think the scale of this movement is helping to build that permission for people that are looking at it and saying like, well, maybe there is something going on here. Maybe this doesn't feel right or doesn't seem right. And we know that's happening because it's growing every time we do one of these kinds of like national days. So for me, the sort of like everyone's welcome, I want, people to come down to the point. I want them to hear our speakers. So our speakers are really going to be focused on talking to us about the stakes right here in Pennsylvania. And so we've been sort of on the inside calling this No Kings Pennsylvania edition, right? Because we have so much going on in the state, from immigration to repro, to gun violence prevention, right? All happening right here. And this big election coming up. And so we're going to have our speakers making the tie between what we want to have happen here at home, how we can kind of protect ourselves from whatever's happening in DC, and all of the ways that we have groups in the state who are organizing around these different topics and keeping everyone focused, safe, and aware of what their rights are and what's going on.
Thank you. And so you've been organizing a little bit, like you said, over a year. What has been something that has surprised you, like a lesson you've been able to take away? Because you said you just did this, and now this is ongoing because people are so passionate about showing up for each other.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think there are two things that have really surprised me. I think the first is how easy it is to say, you know what, I want that thing over there to change. And then to get a group of people together who also want that thing to change and start working on making it happen, start working on making that change happen. And I don't have any special skills that made me able to do this. Any person who sees something in their community or in their state or in their country that they want to change can point at it and say, hey, that thing needs to change, and form a group of people who want to work with them to change it. I think that's the first surprising thing that I've noticed over the last year. I think the second surprising thing is how we can really, when we're organizing around a topic, how many groups and organizations already exist that maybe touch that topic, or you can like join the coalition of people who are already organized around that topic. So one of the things that was so exciting about the Miss Shannon work was that when we said, hey, like, who else is working on this? We got dialed in to so many wonderful immigrant rights groups around the state who had been working on this for years. And so we were able to learn from them first and foremost, understand what actions we could take that would help and not harm. First and foremost, the folks who are being detained in the Moshannon Valley Detention Center and their families. And so we weren't just sort of stumbling around trying different things and not really knowing what the impact would be. There are people in every space that have experience and can help guide you and give you direction on like what are good actions to take, what has been done before, what has been successful, and then can help like, maybe you don't want to try that, right? That thing would not be a good call. And so I think both of those things, how you can form a group, you can pick something that you want to work on and just start working on it, and that there are other people out in the world who can help guide you and support you and give you advice and give you feedback and like redirect you if you're going down the wrong path. That has been so energizing and exciting to see, and just how quickly all of that can come together is also really exciting. People have a lot of energy for this stuff right now.
Yeah, that's really, really great. And before you go, can you just let us know, for anybody who's like, I want to learn more, I want to get involved in Pittsburgh Women for Democracy, or I just have questions about Saturday, how
Yes,
can they get in
please.
contact with you and how can they reach out?
Absolutely. So we are on Instagram and Facebook. We have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, and we have a Facebook page, which people are welcome to join. You can message us there. We have an Instagram page, which is Pittsburgh Women for Democracy. You can message us there. If people want to email me, they can send me an email. Our email address is Pittsburgh Women for Democracy. I know that's kind of a long one. Pittsburgh Women for Democracy at gmail.com. So if people send me an email, and I'll get that, and I'll be able to see their question and respond, or point them in the right direction if they're looking for more information about something else.
Perfect, Megan. Well, thank you so much for taking time out to talk with us, and we look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Yes, Miracle. I'm so excited to see you too. Thank you so much for having me. It was a real honor to be here.
It was an honor to have you as well. Thank you so much. That has been Megan from Pittsburgh Women for Democracy. And like you said, there's a lot of things that you can do, a lot of ways to get involved in this election, and just being able to talk to your friends, because we know it's so important for people to realize how they're able to use their power, how they're able to show up for each other and advocate for each other. And to talk about a little bit about advocating for each other, we know a lot of you all have had conversations and questions about this election. What's going on with this election? What do we need to know about this election? And so I want to take a little bit of time out before we are going, just to talk a little bit about what's going on, because I know a lot of you all have been getting mailers. A lot of you all have had questions. So I want to talk about justice on the ballot and why it's so important for you to vote this election, and what's going on with the Supreme Court and Superior Court races. We'll go ahead to the next slide. So Pennsylvania is one of 7 states that elects all of our judges in partisan elections. Yes, I know we are Commonwealth, but for this presentation, we're going to say we are a state. And so what that means is each and every election that we have the opportunity to vote for judges, whether it's the managerial, district court judges, all the way up to the Supreme Court. Depending on what elections is going on, we have judges that we can vote for. So these are judges that we see when we commit crimes, when we get married, when we have divorces, when we file lawsuits, when we need to adopt people. These are the judges that we are seeing, and how Pennsylvania is set up. We have our local courts, we have our courts of common pleas, our appellate courts, like our superior courts and our Commonwealth courts, and our Supreme Court that makes rulings, that have deciding factors, that can rule on injunctions. So much power comes from these courts. And as you see, we have over 500 judges in Pennsylvania, and each county, we have 67 counties in Pennsylvania. Each county has their own local court system, and it feeds into these upper level courts. Next slide. And so what we have is called a unified judicial system. Is literally one of the oldest court systems in the country. And how it's set up is, as you go through the process, because we are a Commonwealth, we want to make sure that people are able to use their rights. We want to make sure that if there is an issue, people are always able to come to the courts to have their issue solved. And they're always able to appeal and make sure they have the best access to justice as possible. So for instance, when you go to your minor courts or your courts of first appearance, you will get a ruling or a decision on a lower level court. You can always appeal to your court of common pleas or to your Commonwealth or superior courts. Also, if there's a ruling and you're going through your trial process and you say, hey, this isn't right, I need there to be an injunction, or I need to make sure the correct law is being applied here, you can always appeal to your superior courts, your upper level courts, to have a ruling to make sure everything is correct as you go forward, right? So this unified system is designed in a way that you're able to go through a process, that you're able to have legal review, and you're able to appeal. And this is for our civil and our criminal courts. So people forget, sometimes you go to court, there's not a criminal matter, it's just a civil matter. For instance, in the past, people have gone to courts to file injunctions so that something could not happen. There's been injunctions about court rulings, there's been injunctions about laws that have come, into act, whether it's from the legislature or through referendum. People are able to use the courts to get final says and get clarification on different rulings and point of law. Next slide. And so again, because Pennsylvania elects all of our judges in partisan elections, it's really important that people understand that this November 4th judicial retention race is very important. Because what does the Supreme Court do? We know it is the big court in Pennsylvania, but it does a lot of stuff, such as, interpret state laws, such as rule on disagreements between counties. Like I said, there are 67 counties in Pennsylvania, and sometimes counties do not always get along. So that's what the Supreme Court does. It also regulates lawyers, right? So when lawyers behave badly, when lawyers and even judges do things they're not supposed to do, that's also under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to make sure that people are treated fairly and to hold other judges and even other lawyers accountable. So in the past, the courts have ruled on a variety of things, such as making sure that everyone has access to their reproductive freedoms, protecting abortion access, to making sure that when people need a health decision, that they are not going to be denied access to health care. They've also ruled on ballot access. If you remember, there have been so many conversations about mail-in ballots. When are mail-in ballots due by? Is it the postmark date or the election date? Do people have to sign and date the back of their ballot, even if their ballot is turned in on time? These are conversations that people have had, and those rulings have been made by the courts. So it's, again, very, very important that people understand the power of the Supreme Court and the power of these appellate courts. Next slide. So why is all of this important? What does this mean for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the Superior Court, and the Commonwealth Court? Well, Pennsylvania is one of 7 states that elects all of our judges in partisan elections. And for some of our judges, they are only elected for a period of 10 years, right? So in those earlier slides, we went through the judges, they have to run for re-election. But we don't want our judges, because they're in partisan elections, to be doing politics. We want them on the court serving the people hearing these cases. And so what that means is, instead of running for a traditional election cycle, judges run for retention. A retention election is just a yes or no election whereby the people decide, yes, I want to keep this judge, or no, I do not want to keep this judge. So when you go to do your vote, you're not going to be voting, selecting a name like you traditionally would. You're just going to say yes or no. And so PA's judicial election is so important because on November 4th, we have elections for the Supreme Court, the Superior Court, and the Commonwealth Court. And these elections are crucial because if we do not have these justices in office, we risk not having a functioning working court. And so this is a moment that you actually, as a voter, get to use your power and decide what Pennsylvania will look like these next 10 years. Because again, for these upper level positions, these justices are actually in power for the next 10 years. Next slide. And so you want to know, why is this election not like any other election? Or what is going on? What is happening? Well, it has been decades since Pennsylvania actually voted not to retain a judge in a partisan election. And because of that, it is very, very important that people pay attention to what's on their ballots. Because if a justice is removed, we don't automatically get another election. No, 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 no. This is 2025, okay? So in 2025, you vote yes or no for these judges if they are going to be retained. If they are retained come 2026, the court goes on as usual. It gets to hear these cases, it gets to decide these decisions. If perhaps we do not successfully have all these justices stay on the bench, what then happens is the governor is able to appoint replacement justices with the advice and consent of the Pennsylvania Senate. Yeah, the same Senate that is not able to pass a budget right now, the same Senate that didn't want to support public transit. That Senate has to work with the governor to replace every single justices. And what we have already known is we have in Pennsylvania a divided legislature. The Republican Senate has control as Republicans, and our governor Shapiro is a Democrat. So, in order to replace these three justices, the governor and the Senate would have to come to an agreement on three people. They haven't been able to come to an agreement on a budget, which is months overdue, and they haven't been able to support uh, public transit, which you saw the Save SEPTA situation. So that actually means we may not be able to have a functioning PA Supreme Court until 2028. We are right now in 2025. Why do people care so much about this election? Well, for a few things. Like I said earlier, the PA Supreme Court has ruled for mail-in ballots. They have ruled for democracy. And as a result, the voting bloc of Pennsylvania has become more representative. And what does that mean? That also means that the PA Supreme Court justices have ruled to stop gerrymandering and made sure that our courts, not only our court system, but our map system in Pennsylvania is more fair. So you've seen on the, like you said, the national news about people gerrymandering, like California and Texas battling it out. Well, in Pennsylvania, our legislature is by the rules of the legislature is required to pass and draw our maps for Pennsylvania, our electoral map. So you hear somebody say, I'm a congressperson for this district, or I represent this district. That is because our legislature gets together and they draw maps. Well, our PA Supreme Court said, hey, we need fair maps in Pennsylvania. It cannot help Democrats more. It cannot help Republicans more. It needs to be fair and equitable for the people. And so what is happening right now is people who want maps to be unfair, maps to basically dissolve the power of Black and brown neighborhoods, are pouring millions and billions of dollars into this race so that you get a vote no. And that means that we, one, do not have anyone to rule on the fairness of our election until 2028. We do not have anybody on the committee to make sure that when we go back and draw our maps for the next decade, that they are fair, because the Supreme Court is the deciding factor if the PA legislature cannot come to an agreement. And we do not have anyone to make sure that our reproductive freedoms are going to be upheld, because, again, there would be no working, functioning Supreme Court until 2028. And so that is why it's so important that you understand that you have the power to decide, next slide, about what's going on with our Supreme Court. Your vote matters now more than you know. And that's why so many people are flooding Pennsylvania with money to get folks to, one, be disenfranchised, or two, to lie and trick people. So next slide. At One in Power, what we are advocating for is for you to vote yes. We want you to go into your ballot and circle yes when you see Justice Thomas's name, Justice Doherty's name, Justice Weck's name, and when you see Judge Alice DeBoe's name and Judge Michael Wojcik. When we see their names, we want you to bubble in yes, because we want our courts to function. We want our courts to continue to rule for the people. Does this mean that we have agreed with every single ruling that these judges and justices have made? No. Does it mean that we do not have political disagreements? No. We disagree with some of these rulings. We disagree with some of these judges and justices, as you are supposed to, right? You're not supposed to be lockstep with any politician or with any election or with any person in electoral power, right? It's okay to have disagreement, but what's not okay is to have a Supreme Court that does not function because it's missing 3 members and it cannot rule or govern as it's supposed to. So we want you to vote yes on November 4th. If you have your mail-in ballot now, we want you to vote yes when you see these justices, when you see these judges, because it's so important that our courts remain and our courts are able to be our last line of defense. Our courts do so much, just in the past couple of months, we've had judges on the court find that people are innocent of the crimes they've been convicted and rule that they get free, because that's the only way people are able to get their freedom is through the courts. We've had courts rule that our schools should be funded fairly. We've had courts rule to protect our access, to water, to healthcare. We've had these mighty, mighty rulings come down because we've been able to argue these cases in court. If we do not have a Supreme Court, we cannot even get to argue these cases and we are stuck. So our workers' rights, our ability to go on strike, our ability to make sure the place that we work are safe, that they're clean, to make sure that we are protected as workers, that's really important. Our ability to organize around housing, our ability to make sure we have affordable housing, our ability to make sure our housing is not burdened with lead, that landlords and developers can't lie to the communities, our ability to make sure that we're able to even invest within our communities, that comes down to the Supreme Courts. Our ability to have free speech, our ability to say how we feel, our ability to even disagree with other elected officials, it comes down to free speech. Our ability to have criminal justice reform, our ability to go and argue that this case law is unfair, or that this evidence is incorrect, or that this law, harms our community members. If we don't have a functioning Supreme Court, we can't even make these cases or even be heard in a court of law. There are thousands of people who are trying to appeal their convictions. There are thousands of people who are trying to file lawsuits, who are trying to argue and protect their rights. And it's so important that we have a functioning court, because again, if we do not vote yes each and every time, we run the risk of not having a court that works at all. And so that is why One in Power has been advocating to vote yes on all. And we fully understand that there's so many mailers coming out. There's so much disinformation coming out. And so people do not know what to do. And that is by design. So when all of this money that's involved in Pennsylvania is trying to get you to become so overwhelmed that you just check out of the process. And when you don't vote, you don't get to win it. Just our last election, we didn't even hit 30% voting participation here in Pittsburgh, right? Because people were just like, I don't even know if there's an election and I don't know who to vote for or what to do. And so I'm just not going to vote. So over 70% of people in Pittsburgh did not vote, right? In Allegheny County did not vote. And so it's very important that people say, I have the power, I have the education, I have the understanding, and therefore I'm going to show up and vote. And so we've tried to make it easy for you, try to give you a vote yes with our voter guide, an explanation. And if you're someone who's like, what, I would like more information, if you look on our website, you can actually go online and get more information and get to have a conversation and find out how you can have a conversation with some of these folks, what are their platforms. And so we'll also put the link in the chat for you in the comments. So you're going to be able to get more information, because we think it's so, so important that you understand what is going on and why you need to get involved because these justices are there for the next 10 years. And we are in 2025 now. Think about all the stuff that has happened, all the rulings that have gone on with free speech, with students, with immigration. And if we're not able to have justices on the ballot who we can talk to about why it's so important for us to vote yes, we run the risk of doing so much harm to our communities and our neighbors. And so it's very important. Again, you're registered to vote. You need to make sure you're registered to vote by October 20th. That is the voter registration deadline. If you're not able to vote by October 20th, you're not going to be able to vote. With these conversations, it's also important that people understand that any voter, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green, PSL, whatever party you are able to vote and you are able to participate in this fall election. I know it gets very difficult because in the primaries, people aren't able to vote. And so people try to show up and they're told, oh, you can't vote here. And so people then be like, oh, I just can't vote in Pennsylvania. That's not true. You're able to vote. Any voter, any person who is registered to vote by October 20th is able to vote yes on November 4th. For people who vote by mail-in ballots are coming out this week. So right now, you can just get your ballot, vote yes each and every time, so that we can have courts that work for the people, courts that rule on decision-making processes. Again, when we're voting yes, this is not every single judge is great. Every single time this judge rules, they're going to be amazing for me and they're going to do right by me. No, what we're saying is these judges are so important. They're going to hear your case. They're going to treat you fairly. You may not always like their rulings, but they're on the court for a reason. They deserve to be there. They have been, it has by the courts, by the lawyers associations, by the judicial associations, everyone has said it's very important that these judges remain, that our court is able to function, that these judges, there's not issues with these judges. So our bar associations are recommending voting yes. The people who you trust, the people who've gone and argued cases in front of these judges are voting and advocating for people to vote yes. And so we as One in Power are also joining that call. We think it's so important for you to vote yes. We do not get paid to say this is something that we care about because of ways impacting our people. It's a way that our people are able to be heard, to be able to file lawsuits, to be able to get access to freedom, to be able to be treated with dignity and respect, right? Because we know that if people are going to try to get these judges off the bench, they don't vote for democracy, they don't vote for trans rights and queer rights and Muslim rights and Palestinian rights, they don't vote to stop people from being disenfranchised, so they don't vote to make sure that and rule to make sure that each and every one of us are able to be treated fairly as Pennsylvanians. We know the replacement judges are not going to do that. And so it's very important that people vote yes. It's very important that you're registered to vote at your where you live now, and that you cast your ballot for these judges by voting yes this upcoming judicial retention election. And so with that, we thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. Make sure you tune in next week. We're going to have a special conversation. We talk about what does Pennsylvania owe women when we talk about what's going on the ballot and why it's so important for us to stay involved, stay educated, and stay empowered. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's One Power Hour. We'll see you next week.